welcome to the weekend warm-up from a cold, wet and windy paddock here at the Nurburgring in Germany. I'm Laura Winter, joined by Lawrence Barretto, and once again it's a slightly different weekend warm-up to what I'm sure you're used to, because we still don't have Will here with us, Lawrence, do we?
No, I was messaging him earlier today. He's still not feeling quite right, but he does feel like he's on the mend, and fingers crossed he'll be back with us in Portugal.
Yeah, well, it might be a bit warmer for him as well.
I hope so, although I can always lend him my moon boots. I took these to Russia. Max Verstappen described them as absolutely shocking, which I thought was harsh. But they're all jealous of me today because I've got warm feet and no one else does.
I think we should have planned our outfits though. I've got a bright pink coat on, you've got red boots.
Yeah,
We're
it's a bit of a
clashing
clash.
somewhat, aren't we?
I know, but strong colours. I think that's a good start.
We're
in
trying
a dreary
to brighten the
place.
day.
Exactly. I know, we need brightening around here, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. We'll start then with Mercedes, seeing as that's right where we are, who have also had, we have to say, a positive COVID test themselves, as has been announced by the team.
Yeah, what's really good, I think, is just proved that the system works. Like, they identified that there was an issue, they segregated them quickly, looked after them, hopefully give them all the care that they need, and the team can continue racing this weekend.
And racing they will, because of course they are after that record for Lewis Hamilton of 91 wins, of course Schumacher's record. Michael Schumacher here at his home track somewhat. He's on 90 wins at the moment. That 91st could be coming soon, and it could be coming here.
So I think Lewis is a little bit superstitious because he just doesn't like talking about these things before they happen, and he was quite quiet on that subject today. But I do think that when the time comes at the end of his career, it is something that he's going to want to look back on and think how impressed he was that he managed to do it, because what he's achieved over this time in Formula One has been incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure, though, Mercedes wanted a somewhat straightforward race here, especially after what happened with Lewis Hamilton in Russia and those penalty points. We have this weather. We have 10 Celsius max. We have wind and we have rain. It's not going to be straightforward. It's going to be anything but, isn't it?
No, so at this stage, it's ending up going to be one of the coldest races that we've ever had in Formula One. And a lot of the drivers today were talking about how it's going to be hard to get the heat into the tyres. They're going to be cold in the cockpit just generally because they're not going to be wrapped up warm. Can't take any heat packs there with them, a hot water bottle. So it's actually going to be quite tricky for them overall, mentally and physically this weekend. I think we could see, we've just got the rain kind of coming at us. It could be like this, and then it could be really heavy rain. So I think it's really going to mix things up.
Yeah, definitely. And momentum's key, isn't it? And Valtteri Bottas, of course, coming off that win at Sochi and very much sending a message out to his critics as well. I think it showed that he does take things to heart that people are saying about him and his form.
I think a lot of F1 drivers often say that they don't read the media, but the truth is, of course they do, because they like to see what's going on. And for Valtteri, there's been a lot of criticism recently about his form, that he hasn't been able to match Lewis. So I think that here what he really wanted to do was show that he's still there, he's still in contention for the world title, and hopefully in these final 7 races he can still give Lewis a run for his money.
We shall move on then to Ferrari. They're 32 points off third at the moment. Much needed upgrades are coming in for Ferrari this weekend though. What effect will they have?
Well, both Charles and Sebastian played things down today. They were looking for a small effect, shall we say, a step-by-step from the upgrades that they brought to the last race in Russia. They worked as was expected, so the hope is that these new upgrades, focused around the diffuser area, will still make them make a little step forward coming into this race. It's going to be a difficult weekend though, they know it. Challenging for points is going to be tricky. I'm not sure whether that's really feasible unless this stuff gets a bit heavier, and even then Sebastian was saying they might not get the tyres into the right window. So it's going to be a tricky weekend all round for them, I think.
But of course Vettel winning in 2013 here, so he's got form at this track.
He does love this place. Obviously it's in home soil as well. He's going to have some fans fortunately here to support him. He admitted today actually it's not going to be the same, but he still gets excited about competing in his home race, like his home race, the German Grand Prix. So I think that will, of course that will help him. The fan boost will really help him this weekend, but I'm not sure that that's going to be enough to kind of pull him into the points.
Yeah, just 13 points from the last 4 races for Ferrari. How desperately do they need a bit of luck and a bit of form here?
I think that what they really need is some consistency from both Sebastian and Charles. I think sometimes Charles had the stronger weekend, Sebastian struggled a little bit more, and it's not quite worked out for them for both cars. So what they could really do with is both cars get into the finish in a strong position so they can get some data from these new updates, which will hopefully help them kick forward for the coming races.
The rain just getting heavier here in the paddock as well. We'll move on to Red Bull, one of the biggest stories of the last week, if not the season, the year. Of course, Honda are set to leave F1 after 2021. What does that mean for the Red Bull engine? Will they buy that Honda IP and create their own engine? Will they go back to Renault? What do you think?
It was huge news when it broke, and I think even Red Bull were caught off in some way by the news. The drivers certainly were, because they were hoping that, given the form that they've had over the last year and a half, it gave Honda every reason to stick around. Unfortunately, they've decided not to. And like you said, Red Bull have got some huge decisions to make. Ideally, they'd like to buy the IP. My feeling is that the Japanese manufacturer would want to kind of keep that in-house, and they won't want to. That leaves them with potentially joining up with Renault again. They're old bedfellows. That could be interesting, shall we say. I don't know whether they'll want to join forces again, but at this point in time, the regulations say that if they need an engine, Renault are the ones that have to supply them, because they're supplying the fewest customers at the moment.
But Christian Horner did say, though, in the press just this week that a change of CEO and a kind of fresh approach in Renault could make it a more fruitful relationship for them both.
It's a really good point. I think the change of management there kind of opens more doors that potentially wouldn't have been available, say 5, 6, 7 months ago. And I think that the new CEO, Luca De Meo, will want to improve his brand, and if that means that the Renault engine's performing well, it's in the back of a Red Bull, and then they can kind of put everything that went behind them. I think that's a good thing for them. It will be a great thing for Red Bull, because they'll have an engine.
And you're right about saying the drivers were shocked, and Alex Albon saying to me earlier that he was quite gutted by the news. There's been much talk about the Max Verstappen brake clause, saying, does this sort of spark that? Could Max Verstappen see a way out? Red Bull have dismissed that, but we're reading between the lines and it's saying something a bit different.
I think it's difficult because teams never really want to talk about clauses. They don't want to talk about the details of contracts, and I think that Christian was very careful in his wording when he moved to kind of plush speculation that was going around. I think at the moment it's really interesting to see what Max will do going forward. He wanted to quash that when I asked him today what he wanted to do. I think over the coming weeks and months we'll get a cleaner focus in terms of what Red Bull can achieve with a new engine partner, if they can find one, or if they end up going back to their old bedfellows with Renault. I think over the next few weeks and months, because the news has been so shocked in recent days, I think we need some time to digest it.
Yeah, absolutely, and very handily placed for us in the paddock. We move on to AlphaTauri, who of course are also affected by the news that Honda are pulling out as well.
Yes, so we've got an interview with Franz Tost this weekend that's going on the pre-race show, and so I've just been talking to him handily, and he was talking about how it was a real shock for him because they've had so much success together. Honda joined forces with what was then Toro Rosso beforehand. They had results almost immediately. It rebuilt Honda's confidence in Formula One. So when they decided to pull out, he was shocked. And for these guys, it's tough because they've really built a really strong relationship with them. The drivers really give good feedback to the engineers. There was this really nice, harmonious working relationship. And now things are kind of thrown up in the air. And with 2022 coming on, and a huge difference in the car that you're going to be doing, it's a real shame for these guys because they're going to probably find out very late what exactly they're going to be doing with their engine.
And not just their engine, but of course seats as well, because the driver market is, well, it's fierce. I think there are 8 seats available, 14 drivers, of which including Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, Lewis Hamilton, who we would say would be shoo-ins for their
yes.
respective seats. Yuki Tsunoda, what does the news of Honda mean for that Formula 2 driver?
So at the moment, he's still going to take part in the Abu Dhabi test at the end of the year for young drivers. There's even the potential that he might do an FP1 session this year if he can get the required kilometres to get his FP1 super licence. I think that there's still a real genuine chance that he's going to be in a car, probably that car next year. And I think that because he's a very strong driver, he's performed very well in F2. So irrespective of his Honda backing, I think that AlphaTauri and Red Bull rate him. So as long as he has a really strong end to the F2 season that finishes in Bahrain, I think it's looking really good for him.
We move on then to McLaren. Lights still on here, everyone working quite late on the Thursday. And it's all about the midfield fight, isn't it,
yes.
for McLaren? And that fight for third. They are third at the moment, but by just 2 points ahead of Racing Point. And of course, Carlos Sainz with the DNF and Lando Norris out the points last time out at Russia. They have to get a result here.
Yeah, it's been quite tough for these guys. After such a strong start to the year, they've started to fall back a little bit. Renault and Racing Point have moved ahead of them, and they're trying to keep up. But when you're fighting two teams with such good big budgets, it's really difficult. these guys are struggling with the wind, and that might sound like a really strange thing to say, but the car just doesn't really like it when the wind changes direction, and it just lacks the pace. These guys are slightly concerned, obviously, with these conditions this weekend. That can make life really tricky for them. But what I really like about Carlos and Lando is that they don't let anything get them down. Their motivation, their positivity is infectious, and I think that this weekend, even though it's going to be challenging, Carlos loves wet conditions, Lando's pretty good in them as well. I think that will hopefully help make things a little bit easier for them when the performance isn't quite there.
Yeah, I've only been in the paddock for a few hours today and already seen Lando larking about. So you're right, very much spirits are still high. We move on to Renault. They're also engaged in that battle for third. And they're probably showing some of the greatest consistency as well. 63 points out of 4 races, and the majority of those coming from Daniel Ricciardo. What do you make of that Renault form over the last 4 race outings?
I think it's been brilliant. I think to a point, I think they're slightly surprised at how strong it's been, because over the last 4 races, they've been the best midfield team. They've been the 3rd best team in Formula 1. And I think for a team that's really struggled to really make the most of their budget in recent years, that's a huge thing for them, especially when they're going to turn into Alpine next year. This really puts them on the front foot to go forward and attack and improve. I think with Daniel Ricciardo, he's been in the form of his life. It's not race wins, it's not podiums, it's not pole positions, but they're really strong results, and he's getting the most out of that car, and I think that's been critical. Esteban Ocon also has been really impressive in the last few races, getting the car into Q3, making sure that when Daniel's performing, Esteban's performing as well.
Of course, they're going to lose Daniel Ricciardo next season to their paddock neighbours here, McLaren. Yeah. How much will that hurt Renault? How much will they miss him?
I think that given his recent run of form, it's going to hit home that they're going to miss him quite a bit. Obviously in Fernando Alonso, they're going to get a hugely experienced world champion. But the fact is, Daniel's been at the team now for 2 years, or a year and a half. He's settled in really nicely. He's really motivated the guys. And I think it is going to hurt them to a point. But in Esteban Ocon, they're going to have a great teammate for Fernando. So I think that they will find a way forward with that. I think they'll find a way forward, generally speaking.
We're just by Pirelli as well, of course. Tyre strategy, tyre management this weekend. We're going to see wets and intermediates, aren't we?
Yeah, so it's not usual that we actually get all 5 compounds seen on the racetrack during the course of the race weekend. But this weekend, I'm pretty sure this kind of stuff is probably intermediate weather. If it's any harder, and the way that you get puddles forming on the track, you're probably going to have to go to the full wets. So I think we're going to see all 5 compounds in use. Even when it's dry, because of the cold conditions, they're not going to want to touch the hard tyres because it's just so hard to get the temperature into them. So they're going to want to focus more on the soft tyres. We're going to talk tyres a lot, I think, this weekend because they're going to be so significant because of the conditions.
Yeah, and it's going to just be such an unpredictable weekend yet again in this 2020 season that has just been so bizarre as fans, as media, as anybody involved within the sport.
I'd also just like to say I almost tripped up on my moon boots, which is the first time that's happened, which has kind of put me off a little bit. So.
We joked about it before that Lawrence would trip up on his moon boots, and there we go. We almost saw it on camera. I wish you had. Could have sent that in somewhere and got 250 quid. Right, we're coming up to Racing Point in just a moment. Pirelli seem to have taken up half of this paddock, haven't they? Racing Point, as I said, 2 points behind McLaren for that 3rd spot. I think all eyes in Racing Point will be on Sergio Perez, of course, his future, but also the fact that coming into this Eifel Grand Prix, he has those much needed, all-important upgrades for his car that Lance Stroll had 2 races ago.
Yeah, so he was delighted when I talked to him in the TV pen today because he's got the upgrades that he was expecting a race ago. He was obviously unfortunate that he's had to miss 2 races without them, but he's got a 5th and a 4th, and I think that just shows how well Checo's driving at the moment. I also asked him, because you mentioned about his future, and he reckons he should know in the next couple of weeks where he's going to be at. And the interesting thing I thought was he said it's up to him. And I know that might sound a bit strange, because obviously a team needs to want a driver, but I think Checo's so in demand that I feel like he can kind of almost pick and choose what opportunity he wants to take. So it'll be interesting to see how that driver market evolves over the next couple of weeks.
Well, the driver market is going to be fascinating, and I can't wait to see where everyone ends up. We move to Alfa Romeo and Kimi Räikkönen going for that all-time record, 322 appearances for F1, previously belonging to Rubens Barrichello. And here, Kimi will take it, set to take it, I should say. I think we're probably a bit more excited about it than he is.
Yes.
I've seen quotes of him saying, I don't really care at all. I couldn't even tell you what number race I'm on.
He's not that fussed, to be honest, but I really like the fact that he just says he's not that fussed. He's loved his time in Formula One. I asked him today what he loves most about it, and he says, well, I just love racing as much as I did when I first got in the car in 2001, and I think that's why he's managed to last so long in Formula One. He had a break, obviously, for 2 years to go rallying, but the fact that he's still here just shows that when you're a pure racer, you can find the motivation even if you're not often in a car that can win races. So I'm excited to see what Kimi can do this weekend. They've had upgrades in the car the last couple of weekends. I think he can, in these conditions, maybe get a couple of points.
And of course, reportedly set to sign for 2021 with the team as well. So one of those seats could be decided this weekend, early next week.
Yeah, I think that we are almost certainly going to see Kimi Räikkönen sticking around in Formula One beyond this year. And I'm almost certain it's going to be at this team, and we'll just wait the announcement on that one. His teammate, though, it's a little bit more unclear, I think, and might have to wait a little bit longer for that to kind of unfold.
Yeah, of course, because Mick Schumacher is making his FP1 debut here with Alfa Romeo and could be one of those young guns going for Antonio Giovinazzi's seat.
There's so much choice at the moment. The Ferrari junior program is so strong, and we've got three of their juniors in the top 5 in the F2 Championship. So that just shows the strength and depth of that program. Mick Schumacher is a real contender, I think, for a race seat next year. And I think if he keeps driving the way that he's driving, he's probably going to win the F2 Championship. One of these two teams are going to want him. I say one of these two teams because we've ended up at Haas.
Yeah, we're at Haas, and Callum Eilert is also making his FP1 debut as well for this team here, in the place of Romain Grosjean, of course, who last time out here at the Nurburgring finished 3rd and believes he could have won it had it not been for that safety car. So plenty going on for Romain Grosjean this weekend. He's his seat for that FP1 has gone to Callum Eilert, and he's got the memories of 2013 to reflect on and perhaps think of what might have been.
He was actually in a very reflective mood today in the TV pen, because I think a racing driver ordinarily would be quite upset to have to give up his seat to another driver, particularly a driver who's fighting for that seat next year. But Romain was in really good form. He kind of said, I was a young driver once and I wanted that opportunity, and so it's really only right that the young guns get that opportunity again. So it will be interesting to see what he can do when he gets in the car tomorrow. Much like Mick, the conditions aren't great, and so what's not ideal is if it's like this kind of spitty conditions, they might not want to send them out for that long. And also it's going to be difficult for them to get a proper read on how quick they are, because they won't want to push the cars for fear of damage for when Romain or Antonio get the car back later on in the day.
Yeah, very much in at the deep end, making your debut within an F1 car and it being in conditions like this, like we're seeing at the Nürburgring. Okay, Williams, finally, we've come to the end of the paddock now, in a miserly, drizzly early evening here in Germany. I think the thing for me with Williams is that we are so close to seeing George Russell secure a first point.
Oh, yes.
And I think anybody in F1, in the motorsport community, would want to see a Williams driver get a point.
Yeah, I feel really bad for George, because ever since he's got into Formula One, he's pulled off some really good performances, and for one reason or another, he just hasn't managed to get that point. And I think once he gets that point, he'll be able to unlock himself and get more points. And Williams have really been improving in these last few races. They can actually go and attack an Alfa Romeo or a Haas, and I know that isn't points still, but it means that they go and racing, and in conditions like this, these are perfect conditions for people going off, and these guys keeping their head, and maybe he might sneak a point this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely, for anything to happen. And I thought that could be George Russell.
Yeah, that would have been perfect timing, wouldn't it?
Perfect timing for the end of the weekend warm-up, but alas, it was not. But no, you're right, an unpredictable race could mean, like we saw in previous races, anything can happen out there on the track.
And I think that goes for every driver in this grid. They don't really know what's going to happen. Depends how much practice running we get, and if they don't get enough, that means the cars aren't really going to be set up that well for the rest of the weekend. And when that happens, you tend to get a more interesting qualifying and a more interesting race. So actually, at the moment, it's all set up, even though we're soaking now because it started to rain. I've got the guard umbrella. It's actually set up perfectly for the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, it is. We're going to go and dry off. That was your weekend warm-up. We'll be back throughout the course of the weekend. See you then.